A message unrequited, forgotten and left behind. The bottles, the tales sent adrift, were not ones his mind could grasp. For years he has toiled in thought of the mask worn by the Golden Witch, haunting his dreams. The story of Umineko is one veiled in mystery from the beginning and until the very end. Nearly every scene, every interaction between its cast can have you question its validity in Umineko's reality, in fact hinging its story and answers on the plethora of interpretations the audience may take. Let's take a look at the major turn within the story, one to represent the pinnacle of the two's debate, a scene that is as exhilarating as it is tragic. The final clash between Battler and Beatrice. This interpretation derives from a particular theory regarding Battler within the meta world. Each within symbolizes aspects of characters or mysteries, but one hardly touched upon is Battler himself. Given magic and the character's step into the magical realm is shown on multiple occasions as a character's way to cope with their trauma, wouldn't the same hold up for Battler? Following that line of thought, the Battler we see struggle in the debates against Beatrice is Hachijo Toya's mental process to deal with the grief of losing his family and self through finding the truth of the Ushinomiya tragedy. With this wide-scale theory, let's apply it to a single scene and see how it can affect the perception of it. In the Golden Land, a clash of red and blue, known as the climactic battle of wits to cap off the halfway point of the story. But when framed within Toya's mind, takes on a different tone. With the writing of Alliance, Toya was at his most broken. After reading the tales believed to be by the Golden Witch herself and coming up with nary an explanation, then to have the truth within Ava's diary to possibly dispel the vent for his frustration, he is emotionally vulnerable. Everything surrounding his own mind and the Rokenjima incident further clouds his sense of self in a haze. Battler during the events of Alliance reflects that. In the final act, he is completely alone with his thoughts, drifting through the island as he comes across the corpses of his family one by one, eventually coming across the Golden Witch herself, to which she gives him a stark reminder. The detective, the objective eye, is isolated and clouded by emotions, only to then learn that he is a factor in all of this. These scenarios, written by Ikuko and with the help of Toya's fragmented memories, help him slowly break down the truth of Rokenjima and his own self. What exactly he can accept as the truth and the other explanations he comes up with become jumbled. This is why, for all the Golden Witch's efforts to pave a path of red for Battler, he created his own fork in the road. The solutions he gives are far off from how they are meant to be interpreted, both from the witch's games and even Ikuko's writings. Toya here is panicked. While he desperately wants to solve everything, also wants to reunite with Angie and end the loneliness she must be feeling. Again and again, her name alone is the one thing that fires Battler up, pushing him to spew haphazard theories that could easily be dispelled with a single red sentence. Whether by failure to accept or an inability to comprehend as to the heart of their debates, of the tale spun, through the how alone, wants to conclude everything, to put a lid on the cat box and be done with it. So, he resorts to throwing out makeshift answers to which Beatrice meets with only waning resistance, before quickly wanting to fade away. If we take Beatrice within the meta world to be the vestiges of the culprit's will, A subconscious manifestation now guiding Toya to the heart of the mystery, then it makes sense why she wavers. The material and mystery spawned from the Golden Witch begins to run dry. The parallels he can make, the constants which remain clouded, become ever more difficult to see as none more have come from her. Thus, Toya himself is done, his mind worn. Even his guide weakens as an excuse to put this all behind him. But right when Battler can seal his victory, right when Toya can move on, something stops him. Fear. The fear that if Toya were to see her, he would lose his identity to Battler. Feelings of uncertainty grip his heart. But what if he finds what lies in the heart of Beatrice? The truth, will it help him come to terms with himself? If things were left unfinished, would the nagging heart of Beatrice and the Battler deep within eventually overwhelm him? And so, Toya refuses to meet Angie, and Battler challenges the witch once more. He continues to think, what lies deeper within this story? Diving deeper into the writings, debating with himself the ins and outs of each trick, but doing so all seems to miss the point of the tales before him. Though he realizes something lies deeper in the text, still follows through with his main goal. Simply attribute the deaths to a human's doing. Still though, he is reluctant to accuse someone directly, relying on some trap, a scenario where responsibility doesn't lie in the hands of one person, or culprit X to which he fails to give a name. It might be a placeholder, as his goal remains to simply explain the possibility of these tricks. But could be that Toya is scared to admit, to stain his, and more importantly, Angie's truth of those they loved. Except for Ava and Rosa. At this time, after the publication of Banquet, should have acquired her diary, but was still willing to twist her as a culprit for Game 3. Perhaps he still harbored ill feelings he could not let go of, or maybe only resorted to such labels as their pieces took on apparent involvement. However, something remains off with how their clash of theory and truth plays out. As later confirmed by Lambda Delta, there's a certain string of cases that could be easily denied, yet Beatrice doesn't take the opportunity. Murders involving two particular pieces whose deaths are obfuscated. If any hint of red would draw him closer to the resolution he must find on his own, dissatisfaction would fill Toya, for he subconsciously knows something lurks deeper. Through the vague assortment of facts, he must put it together naturally, not forced by the red truth. The center truth that the conversation skirts around carries for all four games, and it's because of that, Beatrice has no red to offer, without bringing Battler closer to which he must find himself. By the end, everything Beatrice left him is out in the open. The tale she wrote, her heart, everything that had become known to the world had been laid bare. All that's left is for Toya to piece together the existence of not just Beatrice, but himself. And that's when he realized something. You can construct any theory to wiggle the ins and outs and wedge a valid blue in the sea of red. But when it comes to who pulled them off, the possibilities begin to close in. Realizing this infinite loop of discussion that surrounds an insignificant piece, Battler, Toya, shifted his focus to understanding Beatrice herself. The question of who and why rang throughout the air. The flavorful, brutal murders of the story no longer matter to him. It's who carried them out. For why did they go to such lengths? Questions that, in spite of the confusion he harbored internally, would fight to answer. His acceptance of himself relied heavily on the promise he had made that day. He still vehemently fights to understand the messages sent by the late Beatrice, to not only give closure to the late witch, but to work through his own trauma from the family and self he had lost. Maybe within these tales, through understanding Beatrice, can understand his sin, and make peace with the Ushiromiya battler tucked far within. Through this lens, this scene shows how even with all the time and perspectives Toya could see from, it would not close the rift between the witch and her beloved prince. Set about by deeply human misunderstandings, a tragic relationship separated by heart, but a yearning to close that gap and amend. It was an extraneous mental process, spanning days, months, years perhaps, with any seams close together to produce this fiction. No matter how much one knows another, no matter how close they are, what lies deep in the heart of both is a mystery, veiling that truth in fantasy may push them away from the desired path, but can also draw them closer. Beatrice's writings failed to get across the message she wished, yet it inspired Toya to seek underneath it all, to look at it from a different angle, reorganize the information, and understand the gears in motion to ultimately pick at the strings that lead to the puppet master, so that eventually, the dying wish of the one he held dear will come to fruition. That's the thing, depending on the lens and the adjustments made, the subject can shift or take on a whole new meaning with the information brought to the table. Umineko is brimming with scenes like this, parallels that can be made in abundance. Its ambiguous nature is one of the many reasons I love and have held on to it dearly. For as much discussion as there already is on theory and interpretations of Umineko's story, still taking a scene or aspect and seeing how it takes shape in different contexts is something interesting to see. There are many individual fictions and meanings that can come from doing so, but it's most important to remember to keep the heart intact. And with that, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching. Later.